So this is a collaboration between RCVS Knowledge, AHDB and the Pigs Vet Society. It's just worth saying again, we're recording this webinar, so we want everyone to be aware of that. And we're throughout you can enter any questions you have in the Q&A. We won't be monitoring the chat, so if you've got anything you want to bring, please put it in the Q&A and we will definitely follow that up. I'm Fiona Lovett from RCVS Knowledge, Clinical Lead in Medicines, and it's a great pleasure to welcome Alex Thomsett, Pig Vet Society, Richard Pearson, both Alex and Rich work for George Vet Group, and Jenny Newman from AHDB. So I'll just start. Thanks, Rosie, for sharing the screen. Apologies. Best laid plans and everything crashes. So next slide, please, Rosie. Yeah, so that's who we have. And the reason we're putting this webinar on, RCVS Knowledge run Farm Vet Champions. And so Alex came to me a couple of months ago and said, could we do something alongside Pig Vet Society? Alex, I'm going to go straight over to you and just give us your motivation for the webinar.
Thanks, Fiona. Well, eMB has been with the pig sector for many years now and has been really critical in how we've addressed antimicrobial usage and looked at reduction of antimicrobial usage across farms within the pig sector. We felt it was really important just to come back to how the database was set up and what it offers in terms of data analysis, so that this can be taken to producers and used as a tool to effectively help a better understanding of antimicrobial usage and how that can be monitored, measured and reviewed in the context of disease challenges and preventative medicine strategies. So we hope that from this webinar, we provide some more information on how the database and the information it has within it can be used in those conversations.
Brilliant. Thanks, Alex. That's really helpful intro. And I know this is a pig webinar and we've started with a massive picture of a calf on the screen, but there is some logic there in that the eMB, my motivation, what part of it, I mean, it's brilliant to be working with Pig Vet Society and encouraging pig vets, but we do have a massive need to be collecting ruminant data. And this is, we're wanting, part of the webinar is demonstrating what you're able to do with the eMB and maybe looking to the future of where we might get with the Ruminant Medicine Hub in the future. So that's my excuse for having the calf on the screen now. But I think it's appropriate if we go straight to, if Rosie can stop sharing and Jenny, would you like to share your slides, please? So Jennifer Newman has been at AHDB since 2012 and she worked on the development of the eMB. So she's been working on that for 10 years now, Jenny. I bet does it feel like that? So yeah, Jenny, you are the expert on how eMB works and the using the data. And you've been key both to this and also the development of the Ruminant Medicine Hub. So we're delighted to have you here, Jenny, and I'll hand straight over to you to tell us about eMB. Thank you.
Thank you, Fiona. So good evening. Just checking I'm sharing the right screen, hopefully so. I'm going to give you a brief overview of eMB and the results of the data collection so far. Then I'll be taking you through the data and the reports available to you on eMB. In 2014, the Pig Health and Welfare Council hosted a roundtable event to discuss the problems of antimicrobial resistance and antimicrobial use in the pig sector. Representatives from the pig sector and government were present. One of the outcomes from that meeting was that AHDB were asked to build a system to collect antibiotic use data for the pig sector. eMB was launched 1 month before the publication of the O'Neill Review into Antimicrobial Resistance. Some of the recommendations for agriculture in that review focused on recording use at a national level and setting reduction targets, eMB is helping to achieve those aims. Each year, the data entered by producers is checked by the team at AHDB, aggregated and shared with the VMD for inclusion in the annual VARS report. We also report to RUMA for the Targets Task Force reports. So what data does eMB collect? These are the basic requirements: the total amount of antibiotic product used in pigs and the animal population at risk of treatment. And that is the number of breeding sows and boars on farm and the number of finisher pigs that have left the farm during the reporting period. And that's the basic requirement, and that is used to produce a national milligram per PCU metric for national reporting. However, in order to give a meaningful measurement for all types of pig units, some additional population categories have been added. These are shown here. eMB uses all of these population categories to calculate a farm level milligram per kilogram figure. The eMB farm level metrics are not directly comparable to the national figure unless the holding is a breeder to finisher, finishing all their own piglets. So as Fiona said, we have been running for quite a long time. I've got results up to the end of 2023 here because we're currently in the process of validating 2024 results, and they will be published later on this year. So after the O'Neill report was published, RUMA convened a task force to set usage targets for each sector. For pigs, the main target was to reduce use to 99 milligrams per PCU by the end of 2020. The industry pulled together and almost reached this very stretching target, recording a UK usage figure of 105 milligrams per PCU for 2020. And this was a 62% reduction from the 2015 baseline of 278 milligrams per PCU. The second Targets Task Force, brought together by RUMA, set a target to reduce use further, aiming for a 30% reduction by the end of 2020, 30% reduction from the 2020 level by the end of 2024. For critically important antibiotics, those being colistin, fluoroquinolones, and third and fourth generation cephalosporins, the target has been to remain below 0.1 milligram per PCU for fluoroquinolones and colistin, and below 0.015 milligrams per PCU for cephalosporins. In 2015, colistin accounted for over 80% of CIA's critically important antibiotics used. However, none has been used since 2019. So I've got a couple of slides here just looking at some of the trends that very briefly. So here we have a slide looking at method of administration. So how are the antibiotics getting into the pig? And we can see a steady shift from in-feed to in-water medication. Although both of these methods have their place. The use of injectable antibiotics has remained steady over the last 9 years, however. And this slide looks at, it breaks the use down by class of antibiotic. I've plotted alternate years, and you can see here that the vast majority of classes have a significant decrease, apart from aminoglycosides and, to a smaller degree, lincosamides. So now I'm going to move on to actually how to use eMB. Access to eMB is through another AHDB tool, PigHub. Before a vet can see their client's data on eMB, 2 steps are needed. First, the vet needs an account on PigHub linked to their practice. Secondly, each client of that vet practice needs to select the practice as their pig health vet practice for each of their holdings. On the PigHub help page, there is a user guide for vets that covers both PigHub and eMB. This QR code will take you directly to that user guide to avoid clicking through several screens. And if anyone has any problems trying to set up an account on PigHub or any problems with eMB, there is a helpline, telephone and email, and these are manned 9 to 5 Monday to Friday. So once you have a PigHub account, you can access eMB either by clicking the link in PigHub or logging on directly using the URL here. The username and password are the same as those used for PigHub. The vet's role in eMB is an important one. From the AHDB perspective, the vet is the first line of assuring the quality of the data. If any discrepancies are seen, please ask the producer to contact the helpline to correct their data. Once you log on to eMB, you will see a list of holdings. These are all the holdings where the client has given permission for the vet to view their data. Holdings are identified by name, CPH, herd mark, and postcode. Any of these can be used to search for a particular holding. The coloured box shows the end of the reporting period for the last upload. If this is the previous calendar quarter, it will be green, so showing that the most recent data has been uploaded. It'll be amber for draft returns and red if the latest data has not been uploaded yet. Each holding will have a rolling 12-month total, providing that 12 months of data have been uploaded. This is in milligrams of antibiotic active ingredient divided by kilograms of animal at risk of treatment. Holdings in the top 5% of their holding category, so breeders, nurseries, finishers, etc., over a 12-month period will be classed as a persistently high user, or PHU, and they are flagged here. Once you've searched for your client, you can click on the row on this screen and you get to the holding dashboard. On the right-hand side of the holding dashboard, there is a menu providing access to view data and access reports. As a vet, you can't enter data or submit a return for your client. If you click on the submission history option, you can see what data has been uploaded. And then if you furthermore click on one of those rows of data, you will be able to see what the farmer has entered. So this is test data. First of all, at the top we have the type of pig holding, breeder to finisher in this instance, and the number of sows or boars on the holding, along with the number of pigs that have left the holding during the quarter. The producer will have entered the total amount of each antibiotic product used during the quarter. If the product has been used to treat animals of different ages or for different reasons, each age category or reason for treatment should be entered separately. It is acceptable to enter purchase data or use data. Medicated feed can be entered in two ways. The first is to state the amount of medicated premix used. This would usually be recorded in kilograms. Option 2 is where the producer records their medicated feedstock deliveries, including the inclusion rate for the premixed antibiotics. If this is done, they can select the amount of medicated feed consumed during the quarter rather than the amount of medicated premix. This would usually be recorded in tons of feed. Assuming that the feed in this case has Orofac mixed in with an inclusion rate of 1.6 kilograms per tonne, both of these examples result in 6 kilograms of Orofac being used. So now moving on to the holding antibiotic usage report. These two charts are for the same data set. In the top one, we can see that during the first 3 quarters, similar amounts of antibiotic have been used, but the second chart shows distinct fluctuations between quarters. This is because the number of pigs leaving the unit changes each quarter. In quarter 1, hypothetically, we have newly weaned pigs being medicated for conditions such as scour, but none have moved off the unit. In the second quarter, most of the batch have moved off as finished pigs, and in the third quarter, the last of the batch moves off the holding at the start of the quarter, but we have a new batch of piglets being treated towards the end of that quarter. This peak and trough pattern is very commonly seen in eMB and makes it difficult to benchmark on a quarterly basis. Both measurements provide trends over time and split out the critically important antibiotics. Typically, the milligram per kilogram method is the default, except in cases where there are no breeding sows on farm and no other pigs have left the farm during the quarter. The user is able to switch between methods. Quarterly benchmarks are available once 50 returns have been submitted for a particular holding category, if using the milligram per kilogram method. The benchmarks will be provisional and subject to change while data are being entered, but will be marked as final 18 weeks after the end of the quarter. This lag allows AHDB to perform some data cleansing and query any obvious data entry errors. Separate charts are available for critically important antibiotics, and holdings are benchmarks against others in the same production category. Once a producer has 12 quarters of data, they can benchmark their use nationally against other holdings in the same production category over a 12-month period. The 12-month calculation allows for all antibiotics used during the previous 4 quarters and the total number of pigs that have left the holding during that time, and the sows on farm. Markers are shown on this chart for the mean use for the category and for the 90th and 95th centiles, with the holdings use there shown in the pink box. The holding report also has a table of all the antibiotics used, including the use in the latest quarter, the quarter before that, and the year before, to allow for seasonal comparisons. There's a separate table for critically important products, and there's also a pie chart showing breakdown by class of antibiotic. Moving on to group reports. If the group report is selected from the holding dashboard, it will compare the selected holding to the whole group. Up to around 15 holdings, each holding will be listed in a bar chart. Otherwise, the minimum, maximum, and the group mean are shown. As with the holding report, there are the same 2 measurements, kilograms of active ingredient and milligrams per kilogram. The report shows the group mean over time and contains a table listing all the holdings in the group along with their quarterly and 12-month use. Any holdings identified as a PHU, persistently high user, are starred in the table. Vets can create subgroup reports, which can be useful for discussion groups or comparing, say, breeding units across the practice. The default report is always the latest quarter, but earlier reports can be selected under the Change Report Date menu option. And if we have any vets who are happy to play around with Excel, they can download a CSV file, comma separated value file, containing all the entries for all members of the group, giving the usage against each active ingredient for each product in kilograms or milligram per kilogram figures. So I've mentioned persistently high users a couple of times. This is a rumour initiative for the TTF2 Targets Task Force, where holdings in the top 5% for their holding category based on a 12-month use are classified as a persistently high user. And as part of this, Red Tractor require their members who are identified as PHUs to complete an antibiotic reduction form alongside their vet. This image here shows the benchmarking chart where a holding has been identified as a PHU, and it also gives a link to the antibiotic reduction plan. PHUs can be persistently high users, but they can also be holdings that have had a disease challenge within the last year that has increased their 12-month total enough to put them in the top 5%. Since the start of 2022, the majority of holdings identified as a PHU have only been flagged as such for 1 to 3 quarters, implying that either there are specific disease outbreaks that have been treated, or that changes have been made on farm to reduce antibiotic use. The value of this 95th centile has reduced over time for every holding category. And thank you for listening.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Jenny. That was really comprehensive, and I learned a lot about eMB in that, and that was really helpful. Thank you. So, Alex, can I just ask you to share your screen? And so now we're going to hear from Alex Thomsett. Alex is a director of the George Vet Group. She's worked there since graduating from RVC in 2003. And initially worked multi-species and has been exclusively working with pigs for 15 years. She's got her RCVS diploma in pig medicine, and she's currently junior vice president of Pig Vet Society and chair of their medicine subgroup. So really perfect person to be doing this presentation. Thanks, Alex. Over to you.
Thanks very much, Fiona. There is a little bit of overlap between my slides and Jenny's, just to sort of reiterate some of the key points. But the major thrust of my section is taking the information that Jenny's given about the background of eMB and what charts and data it generates, and putting that into the context of how client interactions and conversations can start based on that. So as Jenny said, eMB was developed by AHDB and has been a key part of antimicrobial usage reduction and how usage has been recorded by the pig sector. And its addition into the Red Tractor pigs assurance standard was a really important factor in making sure that engagement was widespread across pig producers. And this really has made a significant contribution to how antimicrobial usage is measured and the reductions that have been seen within the pig sector. The establishment of the baseline was based on 2015 data, which was historic, and then going forward, what has been recorded by producers, as Jenny has outlined. It is a method of recording usage data on the bi-quarter submission basis, but it is also important to note that it can be used as a fully legal online medicines book if that's a method which producers would prefer to use in order to record all of their medicines usage. So again, just reiterating that the data that can be accessed by vets is that which has been granted access to them by the clients that have nominated them as their designated vet, and that's through the engagement with Pig Hub, and that those vets can see the details that the producers input on each return in terms of active ingredient, rolling 12-month average, and all of the parameters that Jenny has just covered. And that this allows that initial first check, sense check of what's been inputted to make sure that the data is credible and realistically representing what your clients are actually using. It's quite easy to put a decimal point in the wrong place or zero, and therefore just having a scan over what's been put in can be really beneficial in just making sure that the submissions are a true representation of what you and your client understands is what is going on at farm level. So looking forward, similar graphs again. The left-hand graph, these are kindly anonymously allowed by one of our producers to be shared within this presentation, so I thank them for that. Just shows a genuine representation of what these graphs can look like, and immediately you can see that in that left-hand graph there is a clear spike that has occurred, which can easily be a conversation starter with that producer about what has been going on that farm over time, and what may have resulted in that spike occurring, and therefore why it has then dropped back down again, what interventions worked around that point in time. You will know what you have specifically been working on with that producer, and that is then shown through in terms of the data that is presented through eMB. So it's a really nice way of engaging that conversation to evidence how interventions that you've worked on with farmers can be seen showing out through the data, and continuing to engage that conversation about what compounds are being used in the pie chart format, what is the major categories of antibiotics that are being used on certain farms, and whether that can lead into further discussions about certain disease processes or challenges that farm might be facing, and whether there are alternative interventions that can be used to help address over the course of time, following through those interventions that are put in place, and how that is then reflected out in the returns and the images that are produced from the data set. Again, looking at the benchmarking data, I mean, most farmers quite enjoy looking at where they sit in comparison to others that have similar production systems to themselves. And in this case, this is a breeder feeder. It clearly states where that particular farm is sitting in comparison to other similar producers over the 12-month benchmarking period. So where the outliers might be, and again where those producers that you're having discussions with sit in terms of the average usage, the number of holdings that sit around about them or below them, and just again it's a very nice visual way of stimulating some of those conversations about why other producers might be using a different level of antibiotic, how that compares to what challenges and situations are occurring on farm, what preventative strategies or interventions you're using or they are using, and whether there are different tactics or discussions around future proposals for interventions that might influence how that graph can look in the future as it's measured over a course of time. How we use the eMB data was really one of the major thrusts of this webinar. Was we have this data set there, are we able to access it in a way that gives us usable information that engages clients and facilitates those conversations? So first thing to discuss is the requirement of the use of the system under Red Tractor, and how you as a designated vet under Red Tractor can engage with eMB and farmers in order to make sure that the producers are maintaining their compliance with the assurance standards through the collation and recording accurately of antimicrobial usage each quarter, making sure that as the designated vet, though, the annual reviews for eMB data are being completed, and that the output of that is being reflected in veterinary health plans or other documentation that evidences that those reviews are taking place. And that if, as Jenny highlighted, the producer you're working with has been identified as a persistently high user, that the appropriate reduction plan is in place and being monitored and reviewed over time to help that producer to work through whatever might be the reason or reasons for a higher usage than other producers within their production system group. probably one of the ways in which we as a practice would use eMB data to facilitate conversations with producers is using the group data for further analysis, whether that is grouping up farms that are working under one business structure in order to help them understand what their overall usage is across all of the different holdings that are keeping pigs within that business. Looking at the data by production system to see how specific production systems may be sitting within our practice and what the range of antimicrobial usage is across the breadth of those different production systems and within those individual groups. But we also use it to link to other data sets, such as health monitoring information that comes from the abattoir. So combining the health and post-mortem data that we collate from abattoir health monitoring on specific farms with the antimicrobial usage data for those individual farms or the group of farms that make use of our abattoir monitoring scheme. This is also the same, sort of looking at other data sets, such as by individual producer with their physical performance figures, whether it be breeding herd production figures or wean to finish herd physical performance, growth data, etc. Is there a way of linking up with eMB to evidence how vaccination strategies are working and show how those types of interventions are potentially having an impact on change over time of antimicrobial usage? And that, as coming back to the original graph that I showed earlier on, looking at why specific things might be happening for specific producers. So what is the impact of a health challenge? Where have preventative strategies been useful or maybe not achieved exactly what was expected, and what does that look like in terms of the figures? But it does also help to begin those conversations about setting future goals for usage, understanding where you start from in terms of antimicrobial usage is really important in terms of setting targets for where certain producers want to be in the future, and reviewing that annual review that's required, particularly through Red Tractor, allows that conversation to begin where you see where each producer is at and have a conversation about how they feel about where they would like to work towards and how that fits with their specific production system. Another way is to look at the whole practice group data and how that sits in comparison to the national total antibiotic usage figures recorded by the entire eMB system. So the left-hand graph, and I apologise because the scales are slightly different on these two slides. The left-hand graph is the representation of our entire practice data set over the period of time from 2017 right through to the end of 2024. And then the right-hand graph is the national data set, which is the output from the whole eMB database. And that's showing how our practice is mirroring the downward trend that is seen in the national figures, but actually we're quite pleased with how the figures compare in terms of our overall practice usage, total milligrams per kilogram of active over that period of time in comparison to the national average. And with a whole practice data set that you as vets would have access to, you can carry out these sorts of comparisons between the national data set for whole practice data, or how certain production systems that you can group data together sit in comparison to those sort of whole database imageries that are available through AHDB. It allows us to present this data to clients either on an individual small group or practice-wide basis. We would use it in communications such as newsletters or potentially on our website, so that we can keep the ongoing communication about how important it is to monitor and record antimicrobial usage, and how valuable it is at a farm level to understand the data and how powerful that is in terms of looking to the future with interventions that you might be looking to discuss with producers. So I'll finish with a couple of references that I've used that are useful in terms of understanding the electronic medicines book, but also where that sits in terms of Red Tractor and the requirements of farmers and designated vets.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Alex. That was excellent. I'll just use this opportunity to say to people, please do be putting questions. If you've got questions for Alex or for Jenny from her talk, we will cover all questions at the end. Although as Richard's going to start getting his presentation up, I will just, there's a comment come into the question box. And it's from Georgina, who says it is a comment rather than a question, but I don't know if Alex might want to comment on it. Just to highlight, and actually this may have been something that Jenny said, Red Tractor does not require persistently high users to reduce their antibiotic usage, but they do require that an antibiotic reduction plan is put in place. And I think you did cover that quite neatly in your presentation, Alex, but Georgina's just reiterating that point. Don't know if you want to say any more, Alex, on that.
No, she's summarised it quite nicely, but yeah, the reduction plan is the requirement for the PHU. Yeah,
brilliant, thanks. So that's thank you very much, Alex, and we'll get you back for any further questions. But if anyone in the audience has got questions, please be thinking of them, putting them in the box now. And I can just introduce Richard Pearson, who's also a director of George Vet Group. Richard joined the group from Liverpool University in 1993. He's been working with pigs exclusively for more than 20 years, and he's a past president of Pig Vet Society, also chaired the PVS Medicines Group, and has contributed to the Rumour Task Force. So brilliant. You're going to be talking about an individual farm level, so that, a bit like a case study, I guess, Richard. We're looking forward to that. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Fiona. Thank you very much for the invitation to speak. What I was hoping to do over the next few minutes we show how I use some of the information highlighted by Jenny and Alex, but at an individual farm level, and how that feeds into both how myself and the farm manage the health and welfare of the pigs. My apologies, Fiona. I should have had that open so you could touch on the biog, but it's all embarrassing to talk about yourself, so I'm going to skip over that one fairly briefly. Okay, the example that I'm going to give to you, hopefully I've chosen for a reason which will become clear, and hopefully you will find it somewhat interesting and somewhat illustrative. The farm we're talking about here is somewhat unusual. It's an outdoor farm, free range production, and perhaps from what I've said already, you might not immediately be thinking this is a farm that we'd be having an active, ongoing discussion about antibiotic use. So it's a 500 sow outdoor unit, fully free range production, farrow to finish. And importantly, and this is the reason I bold it out, it's non-Red Tractor, it's non-farm assured farm, and that's interesting also because I fully endorse I think what Alex earlier said about the importance in terms of the progress that we've made in the pig sector in terms of two things. One, the creation of eMB, but also within a year or so after that, Red Tractor taking the step to make it a mandatory standard to record data for pig producers under eMB. Crucial factors. But interestingly, this farm has engaged with eMB despite not being farm assured. Ethos of high quality, high welfare pork production on this farm. As I say, it's free range, and I just put up this this picture of the farm for a bit of fun. Ordinarily, you wouldn't see us operating on a pig on a bale, but there literally are no buildings on this farm. Okay, some pictures from the farm on the right hand side of your screen over here. The pigs do live in huts out on the pasture, but disease isn't necessarily a respecter of what we as humans might consider to be a relatively benign production system. And there are some health challenges on this farm which have proved relatively hard to control. So the farm does have a high health status for the what as piggy vets might consider to be the major pathogens, such as dysentery, PRRS, and EP. But other bacterial diseases are most certainly present, and of significance there. I would mention streptococcal meningitis and enteric health challenges associated with both Brachyspira and Lawsonia. Similar graph to some of the data shown by Jenny and Alex previously. This is individual farm level data from pretty much when the scheme started in 2017 through to 2024. And as I say, this farm took the voluntary decision in their case to actually be engaged with eMB. So the graphic shows clear progress with antibiotic usage over time, and I've been present where people have used the diet analogy when it comes to antibiotic use, and said, well, losing those first few pounds is easy. It gets a little bit more difficult after that. But I do think it's fair to say that some of the health challenges I alluded to in the last slide have influenced antibiotic use over time. I think it's also fair to say that I'd rather focus on the end point of this graph rather than the starting point. But we're all on a journey, and this farm has gone from what I would consider to be a moderate to a relatively high user of antibiotics to now being a relatively low user. And that's interesting. They've gone on something of a journey. Okay, as we've already heard, there's significant facility with eMB for doing further analysis of antibiotic use. And what we're looking at here is the same graphic you've seen previously, showing the relative split by antibiotic class. And I think it's important to say at this point that prescribing is the responsibility of the attending vet. In this instance, that's me, and that's a responsibility I take pretty seriously. The breakdown basically allows us to allocate cost centres in terms of antibiotic use and ask that crucial question: what is the driver here? Hopefully, I know the answer. And so, in terms of this farm, the major driver for both this penicillin use and this trimethylsulfonamide use is streptococcal infections, specifically meningitis. And the primary driver for the pleuromutilin use on this farm is enteric infections, Lawsonia, and particularly Brachyspira. So it's really useful to be able to do that. Okay, just a quick word about the changing regulatory framework within which we all work. Hopefully most of you are aware that we had a substantive overhaul of vet med legislation last May, updating the existing VMR from 2013. And obviously substantive elements of this overhaul have been aimed at controlling further development of AMR, including elements such as a ban on antibiotic prophylaxis at a group level, except in exceptional circumstances, and a requirement to review the need for ongoing antibiotic medication and consider and implement where practical alternative strategies. So substantive tightening of the regulatory environment with regards to prescription of antibiotics in this legislation. And I mention that because that, I think, feeds into our strategy at an individual farm level. So this is a document I use and update on a regular basis with the farm that I'm using as an example here. And my apologies for the busyness of this slide. This is the latest copy, but we use this as a basis for recording ongoing losses associated with those different diseases. For keeping the latest diagnostics up to date. So we feel we've got a level of justification for the prescribing and the antibiotic use that's going on there, but also very importantly, so we can actively consider alternative strategies, trial those strategies and assess how well they are or are not working, and basically to help keep us on track. So that's just a copy, and hopefully gives you a feel of how I approach that review element at an individual farm level. So brief note about method of delivery on this farm, and Jenny touched on this, that this in the pig sector has gradually drifted over time, reflecting a more targeted approach to use of antibiotics in pigs, hopefully. Determining the most effective mode of delivery in any given circumstance is another key responsibility, of course, of the prescribing vet, again, in this case, me. The main delivery routes are well identified, and I should say feed med, they're all important options: feed, water, injectable in pig medicine. And indeed, on this farm, we do use all of those routes of delivery. And the reason for showing this slide, which is another picture from this farm taken relatively recently, is just to try and illustrate some of the challenges we face in certain circumstances with achieving appropriate delivery. And if I were to consider using water medication on this farm, at certain times of year, we have a lot of environmental water because it rains, and also the water systems are sometimes just not capable or are leaking. And so all of that we've got to take into account in terms of deciding the most effective means of delivering antibiotics to our pigs. Feed delivery remains an important option for us in the pig sector in certain circumstances. Okay, bring it all together. Hopefully the overall progress achieved in the pig sector has advanced the discussion regarding pigs and antibiotics from a sort of negative one centered on you're using too much, you just need to reduce, to a more positive discussion where we recognize the important role that antibiotics play in securing animal health and animal welfare and human health and welfare as well. And while recognising that everyone's definition of responsible use of antibiotics might be slightly different, I think it's a reasonable start in terms of evaluating our own use and challenging ourselves. Is this reasonable? What I'm doing in this situation, is that a reasonable approach? If challenged, can I back it up? And for us in the pig sector, eMB is just such a powerful tool in enabling us to evaluate our use. As I've said on the slide there, data is power. Farmers obviously have a responsibility to record in some way. Red tractor producers have a duty to record using eMB. But I think and feel strongly that that comes with a responsibility on vets to actually use that data. We obviously have a responsibility to check it's being inputted, to check to some degree the veracity of that data, and to review it annually. But if the producers are going to that effort, we need to blinking well do something with that information. So we do have these key responsibilities: diagnosis, health management strategy, prescription of veterinary medicines, and eMB really does, I think, help us guide us in some of that. And I just wanted to really sign off by highlighting a strapline which Rumour have been working to for quite a lot of years now, and in its abbreviated form, that's as little as possible, but as much as necessary. And eMB is just such a great tool for us in helping us achieve that. I sign off there. I'm going to stop screen sharing, and thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Richard. Excellent. 3 excellent presentations. Really very helpful. I'm just very quickly going to share my screen if it works now. Back to the main topic, and I'm really encouraging anyone listening to be thinking of questions and putting them into the Q&A. Let me just, what a brilliant description of the eMB and how to use it, and how to use it really practically on farm. That's really encouraged me. I know we've got predominantly pig vets joining this as we've collaborated with Pig Vet Society, but I also know there'll be vets joining this who don't only treat pigs. You know, we're all, as large animal vets, farm vets, really proud of the progress that we've made, and the fact that the pig sector have managed to demonstrate their usage through eMB is something that we should all be extremely proud of. You know, these Rumour figures have shown very consistent progress, but it isn't just about reducing use, it is about responsible use, and I think all our speakers have brought that across really well. I just wanted to share this slide, and this the pigs early on, back in 2014, had no data, and then have really, the eMB has allowed pigs to show fantastic coverage of antibiotic usage through the UK. And I mean, this slide is an embarrassment to me as a ruminant vet, because we have massively had a huge gap there for data for ruminants, and I'm hoping that those of you who do treat not just pigs might speak to your colleagues, or think about your ruminant farms, your cattle, dairy, beef, suckler cows, sheep farms. We do need to be getting such data on for the ruminant sector, and as Jenny's been key in the medicine hub. So I would just encourage anyone who is also a ruminant vet, please, just for protecting our red meat industries, we need data for the ruminant sectors as well. So that's my little plug in there for the medicine hub. We are ramping up usage of the medicine hub dramatically, and yeah, please work with us that. So you know, this, as I know there are people here who've joined via Pig Vet Society, but also Farm Vet Champion community. Please do keep going, keep looking to our pig colleagues and being encouraged. We've got a way for people to set SMART goals on the platform, and I think both Alex and Richard demonstrated so beautifully how they've taken their practice and where they're at and moved themselves on and used the eMB to do that. What a brilliant example. I'm sure you've had some really good SMART goals in there between you. Richard, you speak, and I'm going to turn to the Q&A whilst you've got your hand up, Richard. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Fiona. It was just so very briefly, Jenny mentioned some of the reasons that farms are pinged over the PHU threshold, and that it can be associated with a disease outbreak and short-term use in that way. It was just to highlight that another reason some farms have found themselves dropping into that PHU category is associated with a medicated elimination program for a disease such as enzootic pneumonia. In its simplest form, using less antibiotics in pigs is very simple. You farm healthy pigs, and some of these health improvement strategies designed to improve the health of all the pigs downstream below that herd, these things can have a dramatic improvement on health, welfare, and subsequent downstream antibiotic use. But so it's just to highlight another potential reason. I think we accept that as a reason, and happy with the PHU concept all round as being another sort of nudge factor that's helped some people to get over that hurdle in terms of moving more towards responsible use. Yeah, thanks. Brilliant.
Yeah, thank you for that. Right, actually, I'm going to just stop sharing my screen so we can see all our speakers nicely. Okay, we've got a couple of questions here. Somebody said they are aware that some pig businesses with multi-site production submit their antibiotic usage across their multiple holdings against the home breeding unit. Should they be encouraged to attribute the relevant medicine usage to the individual holdings? Don't know whether Richard or Alex wants to take that. What do you do on your where you've got multi-site productions? Do you have that attributed to different sites or as one whole?
So we tend to attribute to the breeding unit, but I'd say Jenny might have a view on that because she sees the wider spectrum of activity within eMB. We obviously only see our practice level stuff. So sorry to pass the hot potato, Jenny, but you might be better to answer.
I mean, from an eMB perspective, from a national calculation, as long as all the finished pigs are included in the denominator and all the antibiotics used throughout those sites are included, we're absolutely fine with that. We do routinely check the number of pigs that have been declared as moving off a farm against the pig movement system, and those farms may get the odd phone call or email saying, but hold on, what's happened here? But as long as all the animals and all the antibiotics are included, we don't mind. Although maybe that hides potential issues on some of not the breeding unit. That's not for me to say.
I think just to come in, one of my thoughts would be, is that conversation with the producer to understand how they want to engage with the data. So if they want to pull the data apart to see how different sites within their system are operating in comparison to others, then having a kind of combined data set that's attributed to one holding makes it harder to pick apart that data. Whereas if each holding is recording separately, and then as a practice or a producer, you can group together those holdings into one of those group usage reports, you can still see the individual sites within that group and refer to the data set as a whole, or refer to each individual site within that data set when you're looking to analyze it, to either discuss what the usage is and how you want to take that forward, or to evaluate whether you've done a vaccination change of vaccination strategy on one site that hasn't been attributed to all sites. Then you can see how those data differ between what's been implemented. So it's as I think in terms of individual producers, it's slightly more dependent on how they want to engage with the data, as long as all the data that's necessary to be recorded is recorded.
Yeah, fair enough. Thank you. Thanks all. Okay, this next question from Philip Robinson. Are you seeing much difference in antimicrobial use between the outdoor and indoor systems? And can you generalize with that?
So centrally, we don't know. We don't ask that question. AHDB does not record whether it's an indoor or an outdoor unit.
Okay, so on a practice or individual basis, go on, Richard.
Yeah, just to say, Philip might have picked up on the example that I gave. The very short answer is no, but I'm not sure anybody is necessarily within our business looked at it at that level. But you possibly heard me say that bugs, bacteria, viruses are not necessarily any respecters of what we might consider a more benign production system. So I think the more crucial drivers in terms of antimicrobial use are things like health status, what bugs are actually there, and the standard of management, the standard of stockmanship. These are key factors. Mindset is another crucial one. You know, how do we regard the interaction between the pigs, bugs, and the environment? So I think these are all bigger and more important factors than that simple indoors, outdoors, and pitting one, you know, not pitting one against another, but making that comparison, I think, is perhaps less useful. Those are my thoughts.
Helpful, thank you. Okay, I'm aware that we're just up with time, but so if anyone's got a final question, get it in there quickly. There is a sort of question here, but really a thank you from one of the participants, so who's joined us from Hungary and whose practice is responsible for more than 5,000 cattle, and wanting to know if she could cooperate with our data collection systems. I suggest, Gerda, you send an email through, and I quite like the thought of some international collaboration, but that does sound like more a ruminant question than a pig one. So I'm feeling slightly responsible for picking that up. But as far as I know, Jenny, the eMB and the Medicine Hub, and it's all UK producers, isn't it?
It is all UK producers, but and we wouldn't want to collect data particularly, but if Gerda wanted a test login to have a look, just get in touch and we'll see what we can do.
Yeah, so brilliant. Thank you, Jenny. We'll send an email and we can just talk. And then there has been a final question zipped in there. I think this is Jamie answering the indoors versus the outdoors, because you've put variable within the groups. In Scotland, these analyses are carried out over time and are seriously useful. I think that's another a kind of confirmation that, you know, with data, I think that's what's come out of this. How brilliant to have the data to be able to then have those discussions with the farmers, be able to benchmark, be able to encourage other vets in the practice. That's certainly been my take home, and I'm thinking that's what this final comment is also saying. I don't know, Richard, Alex, Jenny, do any of you have a final thing to say? Because I think we need to say our thank yous and wrap up.
I think probably it's just to say thank you to Richard, Jenny and RCVS Knowledge for helping to facilitate this meeting and presenting some really useful and informative information that hopefully those attending and those that have an opportunity to review later will gain from and continue that ongoing discussion on antimicrobial usage within not just our sector but across the other species sectors. That was the major driver for trying to get this webinar off the ground, and I hope at least to some extent it's hit its brief, but will continue to drive the conversation in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think you've summed that up really well, Alex. Thank you. Comment, Richard? Or
yeah, it was just to say thanks for the invitation to speak. One final comment on the indoor-outdoor debate from Philip was really just to point out that the vast majority of pigs outdoors in this country, which is a fair chunk of the pig sector now, do come indoors at weaning and are reared in indoor systems. So the database in terms of free-range production, like the example I gave, wouldn't be particularly extensive. But thanks for the invitation to speak, and that's great. Thanks, Fiona.
okay, well, so I'll wrap up then. Thank you so much. Thank you for the idea and for putting it all together, Alex. Absolutely brilliant. Thank you to the Pig Vet Society. Thank you to Richard, and thank you, Jenny and the AHDB. We've really pleased that we put this on. So yes, thank you very much, and we'll close the webinar there.